What do you think of the parents that kick their kids out as soon as they have turned 18 years old? My mum kicked me out at 16 when I got advice to go on an independent youth benefit. They had to contact my mum to basically say she didn't want me. She turned round and said that I can come back whenever I want. So I was denied financial support. Then I found out she had moved to another island. I don't talk to her much. Dad didn't want to have kids. Once we were 7 or 8 years old, my mother pretended to still like us, but she didn't seem to, had more independent personality. I believe that many past generations had children more out of obligation than out of a genuine desire to be parents for the rest of their lives. That's an absolute fact. Not just having children out of obligation, but marrying the first person you can out of obligation to have said children. This person who you may not even like, making children you don't even really want. Source: my parents. Welp. I was kicked out at 16 and again at 18. My mother had no ambitions for work and decided the low to zero income way of life was a good choice to raise 3 kids, addictions and mental disorders. Anyhow, she demanded $500 per month from me while I was in high school. At the time, a full-time job at minimum wage would net you about $300 bi-weekly. Needless to say, I first had to drop out of school to work full-time to pay her that. Eventually I got back into school, cut back on, and quit jobs until I was part-time and could actually attend school. This caused money to stop coming in. This caused her to be angry. This caused me to become homeless. So now, when she asks for help or simply wants to talk to me and I don't reply, well, there you go. There were many other things involved, and if you are a dick to your kids, they will be a dick to your kids. They will be a dick to you when they are adults. Rightfully so. Yes, I am now a parent, and no, under no circumstances would I do what she did. It always astounds me how some parents treat their kids like tenants, then try to casually call them up when they're independent. Nobody wants to keep in touch with their imperialistic landlord. It amazes me how few parents seem to realize that they have to earn a place in their kids' adult lives. I don't think I've ever met someone who had cut their parents out of their lives, where it was just the kid being an ass and the parents were completely innocent. Was one of those kids, haven't spoken to my parents in over 10 years, have no intention on speaking to them any time in the future either. Lowell, my roommate, was kicked out of his house by his mum when he was 18 by being driven to a gas station a fair distance away and just left there on his birthday. He found a way home to find all his stuff on the lawn, the locks on the doors changed, the doorbell disabled, all the blinds and stuff closed, mother hiding within. He lived with his dad long enough to afford his own place and pieced out. Years later, he gets a text from his mum, who found his number by asking around. Basically said, "Hello, is this Jim? It's your mom. Just wanted to catch up." And the ice-cold motherfucker responds with, "I don't know. If you're looking for him, maybe check the gas station where you last saw him. Maybe he's still there." And that was the last thing he said, low. Apparently she was all pissed off and tried to get at him through his dad. But the dad was like you, dumped him off at a fucking gas station, you psychopath. How do you think he would feel about you? And just stonewalled her. He didn't appear too fucked up over it, but I think it left its marks. He moved around a lot, never bought himself a lot of stuff because he said he likes to keep it light, so he can up and be gone in an hour kind of thing. Which he did when he moved out. He basically packed a large suitcase and a knapsack and was on the bus to the next place. Yep, same here. If I'm such a terrible burden, allow me to relieve you of myself. Same. I cut all ties. They both died young. My life was rough for a while, but it all turned out ok. And now I'm the adult and my oldest is 20. He's still at home, rent-free, while he pursues his career and education. I'll do the same for the other 4. We bought a new house when my oldest was 19, and we specifically made sure he had a room where he could feel comfortable to stay here and have his own space. I graduated 5th in my class academically, placed in states in sports my junior and senior year, and held a part-time job on weekends. Sometimes I'd get home at midnight after a tournament, and then work my shitty job at 5 the next day. Kicked out less than 2 weeks after turning 18, started college 2 months later after couch surfing, and now my parents and I rarely talk. They still can't figure out why they don't see their grandkids often. I mean, not being conceited, but what the fuck else was I supposed to be doing to not get kicked out? Same. Dad kicked me out at 16. I haven't spoken to him in like 2.5 years. My mom and I text like once every other month at the most. And I moved across country the day I turned 18 and never looked back. If you are a parent and you want a relationship with your kids, they need to know they are safe with you and that they have a place in your home. My parents found out through my sister I had a kid, so I don't speak to my siblings anymore. She also gave them my address, so after not speaking to them for 7 years, they fly over and demand to see their grandchild and try to break down my front door. They are lucky cops got there before my door gave in, because I had my R15 on the door. No idea how they think beating the shit out of me for years gives them the right to my kid. I was 17, a semester away from graduating. My evangelical parents found some weed in my brother's room. I woke up early on a school morning to the sound of my father angrily throwing mine and my brother's things out of the house and out into the yard. He and I spent the next 5 years homeless, at best sleeping on a friend's floor, at worst sleeping on concrete sidewalks, exposed to the elements and the worst in people. I'm 34 now and off the streets, almost a decade now, but it forever changed the course of my life for the worse, and worst of all, my brother was never able to recover. He took his life almost a year ago. My parents divorced for a second time about a year after kicking us out. My father almost immediately remarried. I later found out that he had put his stepson through college and paid his rent while we were eating out of dumpsters. That was probably the most painful thing I ever had to absorb and internalize. I think some people are even potentially able to self-sustain in that situation, albeit a very small percentage. But to shelter your kids completely and not give them the skills to survive and then abandon them is abuse in my eyes. That's one of the most cold and heartless things I've read on Reddit. Your brother did so not deserve this. Neither of you did. I hope life is better. This happened in my house to my older sibling. He was not close to graduation. He had early childhood trauma. I was the first child of my mother's second marriage. Her first was violently abusive and had learning delays as a result. When my exacting mother found weed in his room and a pipe, she kicked him out of the house to protect me. I was 6 and I was in no danger of getting into weed. He only had a 10th grade education at the time, despite being 18. He lived on the street, got into hard drugs, had a schizophrenic break, and ended up hospitalized. There was a lifelong struggle then for stability. He was in and out of mental health, supportive housing, and later he went off his meds and hasn't been seen for a decade and a half. I sincerely believe the harsh treatment he received from our mother created the circumstances that led to his lifelong battle with schizophrenia. Yanking the rug out from under an 18-year-old because of some antiquated legal notion of adulthood that is not based on brain science or our understanding of human development seems to me to be a parenting and societal fail. Pretty sure your Christian dad is gonna roast. Brother was out before 18, and I was out at 18, and my dad didn't even have a funeral. Should tell you about all you need to know about parents who kick their kids out ASAP. I'm not even sure if my father is alive or dead. I could probably find out, but I really don't care enough to check. Kicking out your kid as soon as you're legally allowed to do so tells me you wanted them out of the house even earlier, and the only reason you didn't do it is because you didn't want to be arrested. I think people who do this never actually wanted to be parents in the first place. My Bev got kicked out at 18, and his parents literally said to his face, "Since you were an accident, and we didn't mean to have you, we need you out of the house now so we can actually relax, like we used to before you were born." Anyway, I think extremely badly of them. Since you're 80, I'm gonna need you to die ASAP, since you'll never wanted to be around me in the first place. That's so toxic and disgusting. I hope he is doing fine. I hope he went no contact. That's fucked up. Well, they better not try asking him for help when they need any assistance as they get older and sicker. Won't be surprised if they die alone in a nursing home. Why won't my son call me ooh? I can't imagine having to deal with that. My dad lost a place to live at his parents' house for the summer, his last year of college, and luckily my mom's parents let him stay in their basement. From what my parents told me, my dad was devastated by this. My parents' rule was we would have a place to stay without paying rent as long as we were in school or after we graduated while we were getting our first job. I really appreciated their support and not needing to worry about housing during the summers while I was in college. We'll be doing the same with my 3 kids. Boomer parent here. Our two sons were welcome to live at home as long as they wanted, as long as they were going to school and/or working. My oldest is 31 and married. He lived at home for 9 months after he graduated from college, then moved in with his now wife after she finished school. Our younger son is 27. He flunked out of college, spun his wheels for a bit and got sidetracked by the pandemic. He got off his butt, went to community college, got his associates, and was just offered a full-time job with benefits. He'll probably be out within the next 3 months. We have no regrets. Once we were working full-time, if we were still at home, my dad would charge a nominal rent to get us used to managing money. He would just put it into an account and give it back upon moving out. Although if we did move back home, he'd no longer charge since we had experience and could save on our own. I was one of those kids. The rule in my house was you were out by 18 unless you were still in high school. In that case, you were out on graduation day. I actually turned 18 before graduation, but my mother was exceptionally bitter by that time, so I was forced out before graduation anyway. It was an odd circumstance where I had all the credits to graduate early, but my junior year, the state legislature passed a law requiring some civics credits to graduate. As a result, I had to return for my senior year and take 1 class a semester. My mother figured that was good enough. I recall renting a house I could not afford to heat and living off the scraps left in buspans under the grill at a Hardee's that I cleaned at night while still in high school. The reason for my mother's bitterness was mostly due to my father. My father's life was one of tragedy that created the unfaithful man that he was. Generally, he was well liked among his peers and acquaintances, humorous and very intelligent, but he was a lousy father who was only around to sleep. There wasn't much talking to be had with him. My mother was in a constant state of rage, and I feared her coming home in the afternoons. Her temper was quick, and she would grab whatever implement was at hand with which to dole out a beating for even the most insignificant infraction. My last beating was at the age of 16, when she sent me to my room and came in with a belt. I stood there taking the first 2 lashes, and then I snapped. I swirled around and snatched the belt out of her hand and reared back to beat the crap out of her, but I didn't hit her. I shoved the belt back at her and told her never again, and walked out. Our relationship was extremely strained from that point forward, even until the end when she died of the complications of dementia. On that day I gave her a beautiful death she didn't deserve. On my phone is a voicemail she sent me regarding a family heirloom called a bean pot. How I acquired it is another story. Anyway, in this recording, she is upset that an ambulance service sent her a bill for $900, and she would have to confiscate the bean pot as payment, since I wasn't around to take her to the hospital. I saved that voicemail because it's the nicest thing she said to me in her last 3 years of life. That shared experience took a toll on all of us. My mother was a master at pitting us against each other, and it has only been since her death that a couple of my siblings have finally seen through her schemes. As a result, my relationship with my siblings is best described as cordial. I have a younger brother who died 5 years ago, and an older brother who died last year. The 4 eldest had a somewhat close relationship, having grown up during a time when my parents were still together and my mother had not yet gone full-blown insane. But us 3 younger siblings were raised after my parents' divorce, when my mother was a raging lunatic. We were too traumatized to develop bonds with each other. These days, the remaining 3 eldest live with a degree of guilt for having left us 2 remaining youngest behind, and they try to be supportive, but it is as if there is no real trust. I believe the best way to describe the relationships is that me and my siblings are all more comfortable with our respective friends than we are with each other. As for me, life has been a series of triumphs and tragedies. My child is my greatest triumph, as she grew up happy, loved, and well-adjusted. My life taught me what not to do as a parent. The tragedies simply make for interesting stories, even if they haven't left me in a good place. A girl from my class came home after our grad night party to find 2 garbage bags with her stuff in it. They didn't even tie it, so when it rained that night, it filled up the bags with water and destroyed her laptop, pictures, and clothing. Her parents showed up to her house last year on Independence Day because their house burned down from a firework mishap. I'm told the husband just asked them to leave. Oh, I should add they didn't have insurance on the home, so they were pretty much screwed. That happened to me. All of the senior year of high school, I was gone upon high school graduation. I had no money, no skills, and nowhere to go. So 5 days after high school graduation, I was at Navy boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. That's kinder fucked up. What's truly shitty is that anyone who's willing to kick their kid out at 18 would have done it earlier if only it were legal. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Great candidates for a nursing home in their later years. I wonder how many parents realize their relationship with their kids is somewhat quid pro quo. It feels a bit sociopathic of me to say, but take care of your kids and invest in their futures and lives. Rewarding in itself, yes. But ultimately, one day, you're gonna be old and unable to wipe your own ass. And if your kid hates you, he's not going to do it. Hell, I love my parents, but I still am not looking forward to those times. That crooked home on 60 Minutes. They're not Italian, that's for sure. Here in Italy, when the child is finally ready to leave the house at the age of 35, the family gets together to bid them a tearful goodbye before they move one come away from their parents' house. And then 1 year later, his parents move in with him until their death. Lol, I am from Argentina, and I moved a whole 6 blocks away from home at the tender age of 29. My mom still can't get over it. Or Colombian. I'm turning 30 this year and told my dad I was gonna try to find my own place, and he just turns to me and says, "Who's kicking you out?" Nearly broke my heart with that one. This is true for most countries. In India, sons will live in extended families, and even when they move out, after they are nice and settled, with parents paying for all their education up to college masters, including any loans which need to be availed, it's a very tearful farewell. Of course, as a result of the bond, the children too look after their parents in old age and often live together, footing the medical bill, taking them to doctors, easing their life out in old age, showing utmost respect. Or Irish. Or maybe it's just a Catholic thing, this nationality. My siblings and I live within 3 minutes of my parents, and every one of us had a soft exit, meaning we left, came back, left, came back, left, came back until we were truly ready to fly the nest. Facts. My Italian father would have loved if I had lived with him forever. My parents are foster parents. They're my bio parents, but they've been doing foster care all my 30 years of life, and they don't kick out the foster kids when they turn 18. When children's aid stops supporting them, usually at 18, my parents step up and help the kids until they can comfortably move out, or until they want to. They have a 25-year-old still living with them because she fears abandonment, and my parents don't want her to leave long. They love each other. My parents helped out over 20 kids throughout my life to try to become successful human beings, no matter how long it takes. Many of them are still in contact with us. We took them in and loved them. How can parents who raise their own children kick them out just because they reached adult status? I just don't get it, lol. I went to school with some people like that, immediately kicked out at 18. How can they expect to continue their education when they now have to immediately start making enough for food and shelter? Inevitably, most got married and divorced, or at least pregnant young too. Now, 20 years later, the ones I'm friends with on Facebook are continuing the vicious cycle by kicking their kids out at 18. Come on, bro, give them a chance. And you complain your family doesn't have generational wealth. This is why. My older brother was a complete narcissistic asshole. He would hit me often and told me if I told my parents, he would kill me. He was constantly causing problems with my parents. My father told him that on his 18th birthday he could have breakfast in the house, but his lunch was going to be on the front porch in a paper bag, so pack a suitcase. My father was true to his word, one of the greatest days of my life. I wish my parents had done the same with my abusive brother. It seemed unfair that I was forced to live with my abuser. I never felt completely safe at home because he was there. There are a lot of terrible parents' comments here, but my brother has a lot of anger issues, including threatening my parents with knives and tools. After all, knives in the house were permanently locked away. There can be a lot of trauma, especially if the child is physically stronger than both parents, played lacrosse and was built. How many times do you work with the police, school, social workers, and therapists before it's okay to start caring about your own safety? It's an absolutely horrible way to start a life. Yup, literally feels like you're level 1 in a game. You got nothing but the clothes on your back and it sucks. I remember finally moving out of the car and into a 1-bedroom apartment. Felt so good having our own place. My GF, now wife, and I. I remember we slept on the floor and used all of our clothes as a blanket and pillow. We taped together Walmart bags for a shower curtain. I remember making a frozen lasagna and not being able to take it out of the oven because we didn't have an oven mitt or well to grab it. I'd never let my kids start their adult life like that. Guess who's going to the shitty nursing home? Guess who's not gonna pay to put them in any nursing home? It's their right. but I disagree with it. I was kicked out the day I turned 17. I lived out of my car for 3 months while working fast food and completing my senior year. I would have probably dropped out had it not been for my best friend's dad. He found out about the situation and forced me to move in with them. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He had recently got divorced because his stay-at-home wife was cheating on him. Because they had a spare bedroom and I was friends with both his sons that lived with him, he told me it's just us guys living there and having fun. You stay until you finish school. After that, you can pay $100 a month in rent until you decide what to do. Don't argue with me. The man's the same. I wouldn't have been able to keep going to school without him, and he knew it. He's a guy who had to drop out of work back in the day to support his family. He got his GED and clawed his way up to head engineer at a factory so he could afford a nice home for his wife and kids. He bought a nice 2-story home that he barely got to stay in for a woman who didn't appreciate him. The man even came home every single day and cooked meals for us to make sure we'd eat. In the middle of fighting a divorce, trying to get custody of both of his kids and keep the house he paid for, he took me in, adding to the stress. He did that for me just because I was friends with his sons. If I ever get rich, that man is getting an early retirement and a comfortable home wherever he chooses. If that man can do all that for someone that isn't his child, parents have no excuse for not helping their own kids out. Edit. I had no idea this would blow up this much. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to answer some questions that are being asked. This was years ago, and I still bump into them from time to time, but we've all drifted apart in these years due to adult lives being busy. Lol. I still talk to them every once in a while. They are still my friends, and I can hit them all up anytime I wanted to. I still play Xbox with the sons a few times a year. I always make sure to have them tell their dad thank you for me. I had a serious, heartfelt talk with him about a year after I graduated and moved out. I still think about that man nearly every day of my life. As for my family, I was not a perfect child at all, and I have some blame. The thing is, I honestly feel I never would have been the way I was in my later teen years, had they been more accepting of myself and my lifestyle. I saw my other friends being able to come to their parents and talk to them without fear of judgment from them, or God. Ultimately, religion is the reason I was kicked out. They are strict Southern Baptist. I did cut my parents out of my life for 3 years after I was kicked out. They never contacted me for the first year. They tried to reconnect after the first year, but I have them 2 more years of silence. I let them back in my life, but on my terms. It was easy to make my demands considering I didn't need them anymore. We now have a healthy relationship. We can finally look each other in the eyes and be honest. I no longer fear their judgment. That's honestly the ingredient we were missing in our relationship. I now spend a decent amount of time with my father and mother. It's funny, my dad and I actually have long conversations about our different ideologies and beliefs. We even poke fun at each other about it. It's nice, considering I never actually was able to connect with him much growing up. I'm the first male in the past 5 generations of my family that didn't become a Southern Baptist pastor. I think my father sees it as opportunity to understand how people living a different life than him are. And I see it as an opportunity to better understand why he did what he did. A lesson I had to learn the hard way is that it's better to seek understanding than to live with hate in your heart. He respects me, and I respect him. It was hard for my mum at first. She comes from a small town of 300 people where everyone goes to church happily and believes anything their parents tell them. She would be abrasive with me at first when I would talk about how I drink or live with my girlfriend. Hell, she still does from time to time, but my father always nudges her into calming down. Edit 2. I keep seeing people say it's not their right, which I understand, but it's not really an argument worth pursuing. As a 17-year-old who just got kicked out, I didn't want to get the police involved. That meant either I move to a foster home an hour or 2 away and then lose my friends as well as my family. That, or they force my parents to take me back and life just gets worse. I was happier living in my car. As scary as it is being a kid on your own, it was better than the alternatives. Just, wow, that man is a saint of saints. Kudos to him for reaching out, but it sounds like you are well on your way to a good life. Good luck. I bet you also helped him without knowing it. Being cheated on, going through the divorce. This guy had just been wrestling with a lot. I bet it felt good and gave him a positive feeling of control when he saw your shitty situation and was like, everything's fucked, but by God, I can help this innocent kid. That's a good guy. Many have the mentality of, I had to live that way, so you should too instead. This guy said, I had to live that way. I don't want you to have to do it if I can help it. Fuck yeah! If that man can do all that for someone that isn't his child, parents have no excuse for not helping their own kids out. If you can always make a choice for them, and not for you, to keep them safe and give them voice, when times are troubled too, if you can meet and know their needs, to hold them free from pain, or guide them through when pain succeeds, and help to bear the strain, if you can hope to never part and swear inside you won't. Then raise a child and share your heart. But if you can't, then don't. Generally speaking, I'd say those parents don't understand the reality of the current economic landscape, and that unless they made a Herculean effort, they probably didn't set their kid up properly to do well. Not to mention that during most of history, and in the vast majority of cultures, leaving home at 18 just was not a thing. You generally stayed at home until you married, whatever age that may be, and even after you might still live with your parents, or even if you have your own home, you'd be very closely connected, often still working the same land together, etc. The idea that people are supposed to move out at 18 and make it on their own, when they're still 4-6 years from full mental development is by far the exception rather than the rule historically. I told my wife just the other day that I wouldn't be surprised if the US began to culturally revert back to multi-generational living, being the norm again due to the housing situation. My dad did it a bit differently. His rule was I had to be doing something. I got 90 days to figure it out. If I'm in college school, I lived with them for free. Once I started working, it was $400 a month to stay. My dad basically framed it as you can save money here as long as you want, but when you want to get your own place, you're welcome to do so. You will always have a place here. They should have bought a dog of. They want the thing gone by 80. They are shitty parents. My daughter is going to be 18 tomorrow. This world is difficult enough for full-grown humans. Why do that to a young adult? It depends on the kid. We kicked out our daughter because she became violent and attacked my wife. Our son is welcome to stay until he is ready to leave. You're getting a lot of heat, and it's Reddit, so it's not unexpected. But I sympathize with the parents here being upfront about putting boundaries in place that are deal breakers for kids continuing to live at home. Physical violence. Nope. Hard drug use in the home. Nope. Breaking laws that put the family at risk. Nope. Constant aggression. Goodbye. We can do our best to prepare our children for adulthood, but that does not guarantee there are not circumstances outside of our control. Kids have wide ranges of personalities, behaviors, impulses, and sometimes mental health issues. Some kids are simply harder to guide and parent, and sometimes despite the best efforts things go off the rail. I'm not saying we could not all do more to be the best parents possible, but for internet strangers to judge your situation based on a few sentences is just not fair. This is not fair. This is not a black and white situation where you are a parent who fucked it up or a kid who's a nightmare. In any case, thanks for sharing your story. Hope things work out for the best in the long term. When the time comes, I hope there is room in your heart for forgiveness if your daughter can get to a better place. It depends on the kid. Very much this. A good friend of mine recently went through the same thing. His son started using drugs, they think meth but aren't sure, and stealing from everyone at 16. Started violently attacking his brother and sister. Told his 15-year-old sister that he was going to kill her in her sleep one day and rape her dead body. He basically created an environment where everyone was on full alert every minute of every day, because they never knew when he'd go up. They tried to get him help, but he had zero interest in either rehab or therapy. They changed the locks and threw him out on his 18th birthday. He immediately kicked in their front door while screaming that he was going to kill them all, so they called 911 and had him arrested. That was almost a year ago, and they haven't heard from him since. My friend is torn up about losing his son, but he's also admitted that people are smiling and laughing in his house again for the first time in years. People who preach that parents should always support their kids have no idea what some families are dealing with. Most parents should support most kids while they find their feet as young adults, but there's nothing wrong with cutting people out of your family when they become a threat to the rest of the family. They're setting up their kids for failure. Harsh but true. I'm no kids by choice, but if I ever were to have a kid, I'd do my best to provide the best for them. What that means in this situation, I live in a whole new city, is that I'd make it known to my kid that they are more than welcome to stay at home while going to college working so they can save up instead of paying off someone else's mortgage via rent. Rent for an old one-bedroom in my city goes for $2,000, $2,200. Best to stay home and save up equity. Edit. It also speaks to the type of parent these people are. Parenting doesn't suddenly stop at 18. This is also a particularly Canadian-American thing, whereas immigrant and or first-generational families typically have multi-generational households. They are terrible parents who will likely end up in a state-run nursing home. If you have a child, your goal is to make sure your child has every tool to succeed in life before they go out on their own, regardless if that is 18, 23, 25. My plan is once my child hits 18, I will ask them to pay me a small rent. Amount like 20 of a normal on-a-bed apartment rent. Monthly, but I will be putting it all into a separate bank account, and once they decide it's time to move out, I'll give all of it back to them as a gift. They will always have a place to stay with me if things get tough as well. They are fools, selfishly setting up their children for a life of unnecessary hardship and struggle. I think they're bad parents. They clearly don't understand what the world is like for recent high school grades. They're selfish and want their home back, and don't want to keep feeding and housing their kid, and or they didn't raise a self-sufficient child ready to try offending for themselves.